The night he found his son on the floor of the cafeteria of Ravencrest Academy was never meant to be seen at midnight. In the daytime, it was all polished tables, banners of school pride, and smiling photos on the walls. But at 11:53 p.m., under half-dead fluorescent lights that hummed like insects, it looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. Shadows stretched long on the tiled floor. The big windows reflected nothing but darkness. In that silence, every small sound was loud. The slow drip of a leaking pipe, the buzz of a broken light, the soft scrape of knees on cold ceramic. King Lucien Valeries should not have been there. By all official records, the ruler of the Northern Vampire Court was attending a diplomatic summit in Europe, arguing over borders and treaties. His advisors believed he was still in a castle ballroom under golden chandeliers, wrapped in a suit worth more than most humans would earn in 10 lifetimes. But the moment the sun set, a tightness had gripped his undead heart. It was not magic, not prophecy. It was something older and more powerful, a father's instinct whispering over and over like a curse. Something is wrong with Elias. He stepped out of the darkness at the far end of the cafeteria, tall and impossibly still, his black coat flowing around him like liquid night. To anyone human, he would have looked like a shadow that had decided to move. His presence made the air colder. Glass trembled softly in the cabinets. Ravencrest Academy, with its manicured lawns and ancient stone buildings, prided itself on being the safest integration school in the country for both human and vampire children. Lucien's court had paid a small fortune to place his only son there. They said it was the finest education a young vampire prince could receive among humans. Then he saw his boy. Elias was on his hands and knees beside the last row of tables, where the cameras did not fully reach. His school uniform white shirt, navy blazer with the Ravencrest crest hung off his thin frame as if he were shrinking inside it. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat. His palms were pressed to the floor, and his head was bent so low his nose almost touched the tiles. Lucien's throat tightened when he saw why. There, smeared on the ground next to a cracked plastic cup, was a thin streak of dried, almost brownish red. Old blood. Not enough to fill a spoon. Barely enough to stain a napkin. His son was licking it. For one long, endless heartbeat, Lucien did not move. Vampires were not easily shocked. He had watched empires fall and cities burn. But the sight of his son, his prince, reduced to this animal hunger, crushed whatever royal distance he liked to keep between himself and the world. A rapid, furious pounding started in his chest. Even for a vampire king whose heart beat perhaps twice an hour, it felt like thunder. "Elias," he said quietly. The boy froze. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his head. His eyes, which should have been a bright, glowing amber, were dull and cloudy. His lips were cracked and dry, and when he parted them, Lucien saw the terrifying detail that made everything real. His fangs had receded almost entirely. A vampire that did not feed began to lose what made them what they were. "Father?" Elias's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. You're not supposed to be here." Lucien crossed the distance between them in 3 effortless strides, moving faster than any camera could capture. He knelt beside his son, careful not to touch him too quickly, as if afraid the boy might break like glass. "How long?" he asked, his voice low. "How long since they allowed you to feed?" Elias looked away, shame burning in his hollow eyes. I don't know. 5 days? Maybe 6. They said it's part of the program. We have to prove we can control ourselves. That we can coexist without blood on demand." He swallowed, the movement dry and painful. "I just wanted a taste. Someone cut their hand earlier. It spilled. I thought just a little." Lucien's jaw clenched. A faint fracture ran along one of his fangs from how hard he was grinding his teeth. His gaze moved from the smear of blood on the floor to the cracked cup, then up to the ceiling where he knew the cameras were watching. He could feel them. Behind the lenses, behind the walls, there were people making notes. People who had decided that starving children was an acceptable experiment. "Did you tell anyone you were starving?" Lucien asked. Elias shook his head. "Everyone knows. But if we complain or try to get blood from anywhere else? He hesitated, eyes flickering toward the cafeteria doors. They punish the humans who help us. Before Lucien could ask what he meant, the doors swung open with a loud metallic creak. A young girl in a faded gray kitchen apron stepped in, holding a mop bucket that seemed too heavy for her, human, thin, dark circles under her eyes. She froze when she saw them, the king in his dark coat, and the boy still on the floor. I'm sorry, she stammered. I was told to clean. I didn't know anyone was. I'll come back. Her gaze dropped to the smear of blood, and something like horror crossed her face. Elias refused to look at her. Lucien noticed the detail immediately. Her hands were raw and red from scrubbing. Her shoes were cheap and full of cracks. And pinned to her apron was a name tag. Mara, kitchen assistant, scholarship student. Scholarship. So they made the poor children clean the mess and endure the cruelty up close. Lucien rose to his full height. The lights seemed to dim around him. What did they tell you to write in your report about the vampire students, Mara? He asked, voice soft but edged with steel. She swallowed. Sir, I'm not allowed to talk. If I say anything, they'll... Her eyes darted to Elias. He finally met her gaze. And in that brief moment, Lucien saw it, a silent understanding built over days of shared suffering. She had seen him starving. She had probably tried to help. And someone had punished them both for it. Lucien realized something terrible then. This was not a mistake. It was a system, and he was going to burn it down, asterisk. The human girl and the hidden threat Lucien did not strike that night, not yet. Rage was easy. Revenge was easy. But anything done in blind fury could be hidden, dismissed, buried by those in power. He had not ruled for centuries by losing control. Justice, he had learned, required patience and precision. He helped Elias stand, ignoring his son's embarrassed attempts to push him away. I can walk, Elias muttered, but his legs shook with every step. Lucien slipped an arm lightly around his shoulders, steady but gentle, as if Elias were 8 again instead of a teenager desperately trying to look strong. Mara watched them, her hands gripping the handle of the mop so tightly her knuckles turned white. Who is punishing you when humans help? Lucien asked Elias softly, leading him toward the door. Elias hesitated, flicking another quick glance at the girl. Father, please. If I talk, it won't be me who pays. It'll be them. The humans in the kitchen. The cleaners. The scholarship kids. They reduce their food, threaten their families. And Mara... His voice cracked. Mara already got in trouble for sneaking me a blood bag from the clinic last week. They docked her hours. Told her if she does it again, she loses her scholarship and her little brother's medication support. Mara's face flooded with color, then drained again. She clearly hadn't expected Elias to mention her. She looked toward the security camera in the corner, then back at Lucien. For a second, the fear in her eyes turned into something else. Anger. They said it's for science, she burst out. For peace. To prove vampires can live like humans. But they don't starve the rich human kids to prove anything. Her voice shook, but she did not step back. Only you. Only the ones they think nobody cares about. Lucien turned his full attention on her. Humans usually shrank away under that gaze. Mara did not. She straightened her shoulders, even though she was clearly trembling. That stubborn courage was like a spark in a dark room. What is your full name? He asked. Mara Elwood, she replied. My mother cleans in the city hospital. My little brother is sick. Ravencrest promised that if I work here and keep my grades high, they'd help with his treatments. She lifted her chin, as if daring him to judge her. If I complain, they'll throw me out. But I can't just watch him starve. Elias opened his mouth. You shouldn't have. I'd do it again, she said firmly, looking straight at him. You're not an experiment. You're a kid. Lucien's undead heart gave an odd, unfamiliar twist at her words. Humans usually looked at him with awe, fear, or greed when they sensed his power. Mara looked at him like he was just another adult who might fail to protect the children under his care. In her world, kings and vampires meant nothing compared to the question that pressed on her every day. Will my brother survive? That kind of quiet strength, built from years of hardship, impressed him more than any noble's polished manners ever had. "Go back to your dorm," Lucian told Elias. "I'll see that you feed tonight." He reached into his coat and produced a small crystal vial filled with a deep red liquid that seemed to glow faintly. "Drink this when you are alone. All of it. It will sustain you for a few days." He pressed it into Elias's shaking hand, then bent close enough that only his son could hear the next words. "Tomorrow you will act exactly as if nothing has changed. Do you understand me?" Elias frowned. "You're leaving? After seeing this?" "I am not leaving you," Lucian replied calmly. "I am stepping back so I can see the whole battlefield." His voice, though quiet, carried the absolute conviction of a ruler used to turning the world to his will. "If I tear this place apart tonight, they'll call it an incident. They'll rebuild the same cruelty somewhere else and give it a new name. I intend to make sure this never happens again to anyone." He hesitated, then added, "including the humans they use as shields." Mara looked shocked that he mentioned humans at all. Most vampires she had heard of did not care what happened to human staff as long as their own kind were safe. But this man, whoever he truly was, spoke as if her life and Ilias's were somehow on the same scale. He turned to her next. "Mara Elwood," he said, "tomorrow someone will likely ask you if you saw anything unusual tonight. You will answer honestly, you saw a visitor speak to a student. That is all. If they threaten you because of this, you will remember one thing." His eyes darkened, an ancient red light flickering in them. "You are not alone." "How am I not alone?" she whispered. "I don't even know who you are." Lucian almost smiled. "You will," he said simply. Then he melted back into the shadows so smoothly that Mara blinked, and he was gone, leaving only the cool echo of his presence in the room. That night, Elias drank the blood from the crystal vial in the privacy of his narrow dorm bed. Warmth returned to his limbs, like life trickling back into a dying tree. His heart beat faster. His fangs pushed gently forward again. For the first time in days, the ache in his bones eased. But the fear did not dot at 6 the next morning. The academy's loudspeakers crackled to life. "All staff and students," the headmaster's voice boomed, smooth and falsely kind. "Today we welcome a special inspector from the Ministry of Supernatural Integration. Please show your best behavior and cooperation." In the main office, Headmaster Crowley straightened his tie and smiled at the man sitting calmly in the visitor's chair. The inspector's face was different, his features altered by subtle glamour, but his eyes were the same cold, measuring ones that had burned in Marat's mind all night. "Welcome, Lord Lucian," Crowley said, setting down a stack of files labeled Feeding Compliance Program. "Ravencrest Academy is honored to have you inspect our work." Lucian returned the smile. But this time, it did not reach his eyes at all. The experiment behind the smiles, the office smelled of expensive coffee and old paper. The scent schools used to pretend they were safe and trustworthy. Lucian took in every detail as Headmaster Crowley talked. The polished silver plaque on the wall that read Ravencrest, Building a Peaceful Future. The framed photos of smiling human and vampire students standing together at graduation. The certificates from the ministry praising the Academy's innovative integration methods. It was a perfect mask of progress. "Our feeding compliance program," Crowley said, sliding a file across the desk, "is the crown jewel of our institution. While other schools give vampire students regular blood rations, we take a more modern approach. We challenge them, teach them to survive on less, to depend more on willpower and discipline than on appetite. The results have been extraordinary." Lucian opened the folder and read the first page. Column after column of data, names reduced to numbers, hunger levels measured like weather reports, behaviors listed with clinical detachment. Subject V13 attempted to drink from injured classmate. Punishment, isolation. Subject V09, begging behavior at day 4. Subject VO4, floor-licking behavior at day 7. Cognition stable, floor-licking, Elias and the humans. Lucian asked calmly, "How do they participate in this program?" Crowley chuckled, as if the question was almost quaint. Humans act as natural temptations, your inspector. Their food, their injuries, their reactions, it all helps the vampires learn control. Of course, we also ensure that humans who cooperate with the program are rewarded. Those who interfere, his smile thinned, face consequences. Integration is not painless. Lucian closed the folder. You are starving, children. Crowley's eyes flashed with annoyance behind his glasses. We are building peace. One generation must endure discomfort so that future generations will not live in fear of vampire attacks. You, of all people, should understand sacrifice. Lucian's fingers tightened on the file. For a brief, dangerous moment, the air in the room grew colder. Frost formed along the edges of the framed photos. Crowley shivered and rubbed his arms, suddenly unsure why the temperature had dropped. Lucian forced himself to release the file, letting his hand fall casually into his lap. And the scholarship girl? He asked. Mara Elwood. How does she fit into your data? Crowley shrugged. She is useful. The ministry loves a good story-poor human girl given a chance at elite education, helping bridge the gap between worlds. In reality, she works in our kitchens, cleans our floors, and learns her place. She has shown unhelpful empathy towards certain vampire students. But we have corrected that. If she continues helping them, she will lose everything this school has generously given her. Generously. Lucian pictured Mara's raw hands, her quiet anger, the thin line of her mouth when she said, You're not an experiment. You're a kid. He realized something else then. This place was not just hurting vampire children. It was teaching human children that power meant watching suffering and calling it education. May I observe the cafeteria during breakfast? Lucian asked pleasantly. Of course, Crowley said. We scheduled a restricted day for our vampire students today. It should provide excellent examples for your report. Lucian's jaw tightened. I'm sure it will. From the balcony above the breakfast hall, he watched the scene unfold like a play, every detail sinking into his memory. Humans laughed around overflowing plates. Vampire kids sat in a corner, their trays insultingly empty. Elias's hands shook when Mrs. Finch, the head lunch lady, placed 4 crackers and a cup of water in front of him, smiling with false sympathy. Doctor's orders, she said in a sing-song voice. As if this were just another health plan dot at the nearby service counter, Mara moved with mechanical efficiency, slipping trays onto the line. Her eyes kept darting toward the vampire table. When she saw Elias's tray, her jaw clenched. She stepped closer to Mrs. Finch and whispered something. Finch's fake smile vanished. She snapped at Mara, gesturing sharply. Lucian's sharp hearing picked up the words. You want to lose your scholarship, girl? You want your brother's treatments cut off? Then keep talking. Otherwise, smile and serve. Mara's shoulders sagged, but she did not back down. Instead, she waited until Finch moved away, then quietly set a small, sealed cup of donated medical blood near the end of the counter, half hidden behind a stack of napkins. A risky kindness. A tiny rebellion against a cruel system. Elias noticed it. His eyes flicked to the cup, then to Mara. Very slowly, he shook his head just once. Lucian understood. The boy would rather starve than let her be hurt again. A group of human students walked by, their uniforms perfectly pressed, their laughter loud. One of them, a tall boy in an expensive watch, noticed Elias's tray. Dude, that's it? He asked, concern slipping into his tone. They can't do that to you. My cousin's a vampire. He eats like 3 times that much. He tossed an extra roll of bread onto Elias's tray. Here, take it. I'll grab more. Before Elias could answer, a teacher appeared out of nowhere, Mr. Holcomb, according to his badge. That's enough, Holcomb said, placing a firm hand on the human boy's shoulder. Our vampire students are under medical supervision. Please don't interfere. His smile was thin, his eyes cold. When the boy hesitated, Holcomb leaned down and murmured something into Elisa's ear. Lucian couldn't hear the exact words from this angle, but he saw their effect. Elias's face drained of what little color he had. His shoulders slumped. Shame and fury warred in his eyes. Later, in a side corridor, Lucian stepped out of the shadows, blocking Holcomb's path. The teacher jumped, hand flying to his chest. "Inspector," he gasped. "You startled me." Lucian regarded him calmly. "What did you whisper to my son?" Holcomb blinked. The vampire boy?" "Nothing serious. Just a reminder that if he breaks the rules, certain human students will suffer. We found that tying their behavior to someone else's pain works wonders for compliance." He smiled, a small, proud expression. "Integration psychology? It's cutting edge." Lucian's hand shot out, pinning Holcomb to the wall before the man could finish his sentence. There was no visible motion, no blur. One instant they were apart. The next, Holcomb's feet were dangling above the floor. Lucian's fingers pressed into his throat, not enough to crush, but enough to remind him how fragile humans were. "You think it is clever," Lucien said softly, his eyes glowing with a cold crimson light, "to make children watch other children suffer for their obedience. You are proud of this." Holcomb tried to speak, but only a strangled wheeze came out. "Listen carefully," Lucien continued. "There will come a day, very soon, when someone asks you why you did what you did here, why you watched them starve, why you intimidated human kids into silence. And you will be tempted to say, 'I was just following orders.'" His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Do not make that mistake." He released Holcomb, who stumbled and fell to his knees, clutching his throat. "Your program is over," Lucy said, turning away. "You just do not know it yet." As he walked down the corridor, he saw Mara ahead, carrying a stack of cleaning cloths. She stopped when she noticed him, eyes wide. "Inspector?" she said hesitantly. Is this how it's supposed to be? Is this really what your people want humans to do to your children?" Lucian paused. No one had ever asked him that question so directly. "No," he said. "This is what cowards do when they are afraid of real peace. They call cruelty discipline and fear research, but this is not my people's will." He looked at her more closely. "What do you want, Mara Elwood?" She swallowed. "I want Elias to eat without being treated like a monster. I want my brother to get his medicine. I want schools to teach us to protect each other, not to hurt each other for points on a chart." She lifted her chin. "I know I'm nobody, but I still want it." Lucian studied her for a long moment. In her eyes he saw no hunger for power, no desire for glory. Just simple, stubborn hope. "Then perhaps," he said quietly, "you are not nobody at all." The breaking point. The day moved forward with an eerie normality, like a river flowing over rocks no one wanted to acknowledge. Classes took place. Bells rang. Students joked in the halls. But beneath the surface, tension coiled tighter with every passing hour. Lucian spent the morning touring classrooms, laboratories and dormitories, always wearing the mask of a calm inspector, asking polite questions, giving measured nods everywhere he went. He saw signs of the same philosophy, sacrifice a few for the so-called greater good. In the science wing, he passed a bulletin board filled with charts from the feeding compliance program, colorful graphs that, to the untrained eye, looked impressive and progressive. To him, they looked like a map of pain. In the counseling office, pamphlets encouraged human students to report unusual vampire behavior, promising special privileges in return. In the storage room behind the infirmary, he found a locked fridge full of blood bags labeled emergency use only. Untouched while his son starved. By midday, Lucien had seen enough. It was no longer a question of whether this place needed to be changed. It was a question of how loudly. The answer came sooner than he expected. After lunch, the academy held an assembly in the auditorium to welcome the ministry inspector. Students filled the seats, human and vampire separated by an invisible line of habit and fear. Teachers lined the walls. Headmaster Crowley stood at the podium, smiling with polished confidence. "Today," Crowley said, "we show the world how Ravencrest leads the way in true integration. Our inspector has seen firsthand the strength and discipline of our vampire students. They endure hunger with grace. They resist temptation. They prove every day that peace is possible. In the third row from the front, Elias sat too straight, his hands clenched on his knees. Mara sat several rows behind him among the scholarship students, twisting her fingers in her lap. Of course, Crowley continued, not everyone understands the importance of our methods. Some humans are excessively emotional, some vampires excessively entitled. They do not realize that real progress requires toughness. He gestures, and two security officers guided a small, pale boy onto the stage. Another young vampire student. His name tag read Veng. He looked painfully thin, his uniform hanging on him like an empty curtain. Crowley rested a hand on his shoulder. Veng here, the headmaster said, has recently tested the limits of our patience. He begged for extra rations. He attempted to steal blood. He even convinced a human student to risk her scholarship by helping him. But here at Ravencrest we do not punish. We educate. Mara froze. Her eyes flew to Elias, who looked back with equal horror. Lucian's hands tightened at his sides. The headmaster was not just cruel. He was theatrical about it. Crowley signaled again. A second set of security officers walked Mara onto the stage. Her apron was gone. She wore her simple school uniform now, but it did nothing to make her look less exposed. She stood beside Veng, fists clenched, jaw set. This is Mara Elwood, Crowley said, his voice smooth. A scholarship student. A touching success story, is she not? Poor background, bright mind, given a chance through our generosity. And yet, despite all we have done for her, she chose to interfere with our program. She secretly provided blood to Veng, preventing him from learning discipline. A murmur ran through the human students. Some looked confused. Others looked disgusted, not at Mara, but at the way the headmaster spoke about her like property. Mara spoke up, her voice shaking but clear. He wasn't learning discipline, she said. He was starving. He was dizzy and shaking. He could barely walk. That's not education. That's torture. The room fell silent. Elias held his breath. Lucian's eyes glowed faintly red. Crowley's smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. You see? He said, looking out at the crowd. Human sentimentality. This is why it is dangerous to let emotion guide policy. Mara will now lose her scholarship and all associated benefits. Her family will no longer receive support. It is a harsh lesson, but necessary. Mara's lips trembled, but she did not cry. She lifted her chin, looked straight at the seats filled with students, and said, If helping a starving kid means I deserve to be punished, then your school is broken. And if this inspector from the ministry thinks it's okay, then he's broken too. Hundreds of heads turned toward Lucian. The moment stretched. Everyone waited to see what the inspector would do. Validate the cruelty? Ignore the human girl's courage? Offer weak words about compromise? Lucian stepped forward. He did not walk like a bureaucrat. He walked like what he was, a king who had decided his patience was done. Each step down the aisle seemed to change the air itself, making it heavier, charged with an invisible storm. Students shifted uncomfortably. Teachers whispered to each other. Crowley forced a laugh. Inspector, I assure you this is all under control. Perhaps we can discuss discipline measures privately. Enough, Lucian said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. A single word cut through the room like a blade. The lights flickered. The speakers crackled. He stepped onto the stage between Mara and Veng and turned to face the audience. For the first time, he allowed the glamour hiding his true nature to fall away. His eyes burned a deep, ancient crimson. The faint veins beneath his skin darkened. Power rolled off him in waves, cold and absolute. Gasps went up around the auditorium. That is not a ministry inspector. One of the teachers whispered, voice shaking. That's Lucien Valers, Crowley finished weakly, taking a step back. Vampire King of the Northern Court? His skin had gone gray. Your Highness, I didn't realize you were... Lucien ignored him. He looked out over the gathered students, humans and vampires alike. My son is among you, he said calmly, his voice carrying to the farthest corner of the hall. 2 nights ago, he was so starved he was licking dried blood off the cafeteria floor. This was not an accident. It was a scheduled part of your program. A shocked murmur swept through the students. Some human kids looked at their vampire classmates with horror, not horror of them, but horror for them. In your reports, Lucien continued, you call this feeding compliance. You call it discipline. You tell yourselves, and your government, that starving children will build peace. That making humans watch them suffer will build understanding. He let the silence stretch. You are wrong. Crowley swallowed. Your Majesty, with all respect, you do not understand the political pressures. Humans fear vampires. We must prove our young can control themselves. If we don't, there will be protests, laws, perhaps even war. Sometimes sacrifices, then sacrifice your own comfort. Lucien snapped, the first flash of real anger breaking through. Sacrifice your salaries, your positions, your pride. Not the bodies of children. He gestured toward Mara. This human girl, whom you threaten to throw away, understands more about peace than you ever will. Mara stared at him. Eyes wide, Lucien faced the students again. If any of you human or vampire have been punished for helping someone eat, for protecting a friend, for speaking against this cruelty, know this, you were right. You are not the problem. The system is... He turned slightly, his gaze locking onto the nearest security camera mounted high on the wall. And to those watching from their comfortable offices, he said, I hope your feed is clear. Because I'm about to do something you will find unbelievable. What the Vampire King did next, Lucien lifted one hand toward the camera. To the students it looked like a simple gesture, almost casual. To the devices connected to the Academy's security network, it was a command backed by ancient power. Every camera lens in the building cracked down the middle with a soft, almost polite pop. Screens in the control room turned black. The security chief's frantic button pressing achieved nothing. No more hiding, Lucien said. If we are going to have this conversation, we will have it in the open. He snapped his fingers, hidden projectors whirred to life overhead. Where the school crest usually glowed behind the headmaster's podium, a new image appeared, the feeding compliance program files, copied directly from Crowley's computer. Charts, notes, photos. The words floor-licking behavior day 7 appeared in enormous letters, followed by an image of a vampire student collapsed beside a table, eyes glazed with hunger. Students gasped. Teachers paled. Some looked away in shame. You recorded this? Lucien said quietly. You watched it. You called it success. More images appeared. A girl crying as her food was taken away for sharing with a vampire classmate. A boy sitting alone in a dark room labeled Reflection Chamber, Punishment for Unauthorized Feeding. A report note. Scholarship student Mara Elwood provided contraband blood. Recommend termination of scholarship and medical support? Crowley lurched forward, face flushed. You had no right. I had every right, Lucien cut in. My people's children are not laboratory animals. Human children are not prison guards. You built this program on fear and dressed it in the language of peace. Today that ends. A human student stood up in the middle of the auditorium. I didn't know, she said, voice trembling. We just saw them sitting separately. We thought it was a medical thing. They said if we interfered, we'd cause an incident. Another boy rose beside her. My cousin's in the younger vampire class, he said. I thought he was just getting thinner because of growth or something. I didn't know they were doing this on purpose. Lucien nodded once. Children rarely know. Adults make the decisions, which is why the adults will face the consequences. He turned to Crowley. Headmaster, you will gather every document related to this program, every email, every authorization from the ministry. You will deliver them to my office and to the Interspecies Rights Council by nightfall. Crowley laughed, though it came out brittle. And if I don't? You'll kill me? Attack the school? Prove every human fear right? A tension-filled silence fell. Even Elias held his breath. Was this the moment his father became a monster in their eyes? Lucien's answer surprised everyone. No, he said calmly. I will sue you. Crowley blinked. You what? Lucian almost smiled. I will shut you down in courts and councils. I will expose your methods on every news channel that still claims to care about justice. I will ensure your name becomes synonymous with cruelty in every textbook that studies this era. And if you attempt to hide or destroy records, then and only then will I consider more direct options. Mara stared at him, stunned. She had expected rage, maybe violence, but not this cold, deliberate strategy. This was not the fury of a monster. This was the fury of a father who understood how the modern world worked. You can't do that, Crowley said weakly. We have government support. The ministry signed off on our methods. Then the ministry will fall with you, Lucian replied. I have influence there too. More, I suspect, than you understand. You thought I would be an ally for your program, that I would praise your cruelty as necessary. Instead, I will make you an example. He stepped aside and extended a hand to Mara and Veng. Your punishments are revoked, he said. Mara Elwood, your scholarship will not only continue, it will be expanded. Starting today, your brother's medical bills will be covered in full by the Northern Court. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Why? She whispered. I'm just a girl who sneaked a blood bag. You are a girl who stood up when it was hardest, Lucian corrected. And right now, children who do that are rare and valuable. He turned to the crowd. From this moment, Ravencrest's feeding compliance program is suspended. Any staff member who attempts to enforce it will answer directly to me. And to all of you, he added, looking at the students, human and vampire alike, if anyone here is punished for feeding a hungry classmate, you will send word to my court. You will not be alone. Elias stood up then, his voice shaking but loud enough to be heard. I was scared to say anything, he admitted, looking at both human and vampire faces. I thought if I complained they'd hurt Mara or someone else. They told me I was selfish for needing blood. That I was dangerous. He swallowed. I'm not dangerous. I'm just hungry, just a kid who didn't want to be a problem. A human boy near the front, the same one who had tried to give him bread at breakfast, stood up too. You're not a problem, he said firmly. If they starved me like that, I'd go crazy. I'm sorry I didn't push harder. One by one, students began to stand. Some human, some vampire. Some with shame on their faces, others with anger, and a few with something new in their eyes. Resolve. Lucian watched them, something loosening in his chest. This was why he had chosen this path instead of simple violence. Destroying the school physically would have changed nothing in their hearts. Exposing the truth might. In 1 week, Lucien said, turning back to Crowley. This school will reopen under new administration. The feeding compliance program will be replaced by a system designed by both human and vampire experts, focusing on safety and dignity, not domination. I will personally fund counselors for the students you have traumatized. And as for you, he leaned in, voice cold as winter. You will resign. Quietly if you are wise, publicly if you are foolish. Crowley looked around, seeking support from his staff. He found none. Teachers stared at the floor. Some nodded subtly at Lucian's words. When he looked to the students, he saw only hatred and disappointment. His shoulders sagged. Fine, he croaked. I'll step down. But you're making a mistake. The humans will never trust your kind if you... We will build trust, Lucian said, by refusing to accept cruelty even when it is convenient. In the back row, someone began to clap. It was hesitant at first, a small, unsure sound. Then others joined, louder and more confident. Within seconds, the auditorium was filled with applause. Not for a king, not for a court, not for politics. For the idea that maybe, just maybe, someone with power had finally chosen to protect the vulnerable instead of explaining their suffering away. Lucian stepped away from the podium and looked down at Mara and Elias. They were both crying now, not with despair, but with the overwhelming relief that comes when a nightmare finally begins to end. Come, he said quietly. We have more to discuss. A new kind of kingdom. The sun was slipping behind the trees when Lucien, Elias, and Mara stood together outside the academy, watching students spill onto the lawn in restless clusters. The assembly had ended hours ago, but the echoes of it lingered in every conversation. Some humans spoke in hushed, guilty tones about what they'd ignored. Some vampires sat quietly on the grass, still too exhausted to do more than listen. For once, nobody was pretending everything was normal. Mara hugged her arms around her body. "Are they really going to let you change everything?" she asked Lucien. "The ministry, the council, all those big people who sign papers but never see what happens in the cafeteria?" Lucien looked out at the grounds where teachers were, slowly removing the feeding compliance program, posters from bulletin boards. "They do not have much choice now," he said. "Public image is everything to them. A program exposed as child abuse will be defended by only the most foolish and the most cruel. They may try to twist the story, of course. Call it a misunderstanding. Blame a few individuals, but we have the records, the footage, the testimonies. You're not afraid?" she asked. "I am always afraid," he answered quietly. Any father who has nearly lost his child and any king who has nearly lost his people should be. The difference is what we do with that fear. Elias shifted closer to Mara. The color had returned to his cheeks, and his eyes were brighter, but there was still a tremor in his hands. "I thought you'd burn the place down," he admitted to his father. "Storm in, break walls, rip cameras off, drag everyone out by their collars." Lucien gave him a dry look. "That was plan B," he said. "I prefer solutions that do not leave smoking ruins when children are involved." He paused, then added, "Besides, there is something far more terrifying to these people than fire." "What?" Elias asked. "Accountability," Lucien replied. Mara laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "I still can't believe it," she said. "You're really a king, a real one. And you're using your power to sue a school." Lucien shrugged one shoulder. "Empires change. Wars look different now. Victories, too. Sometimes the most frightening thing you can do to a man like Crowley is make sure his name appears in history books exactly as he was." Mara looked at Elias then, studying his face as if seeing him properly for the first time. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not for sneaking you blood, I'd do that again, but for not realizing how much worse it had gotten. I should have pushed harder. I should have told someone outside the school." Elias shook his head. "You already risked everything for me," he said. "They used you as a weapon against me. Every time I thought about complaining, I heard them threaten your brother's medicine in my head. I wasn't strong enough to ignore that." He swallowed. "But I want to be. I don't want to be silent anymore when I see something wrong." Mara's gaze softened. "Then start now," she said. "Help change things here. You're a prince. People will listen." Lucien watched the two of them, something warm and cautious stirring inside him. There was no rush of passionate romance between them, no dramatic declaration. Just two teenagers bonded by shared fear and shared courage, standing side by side at the beginning of something better. That was enough. "More than enough. You will not be staying here much longer," he told Elias. "Not in this form. Ravencrest will close for a time while we rebuild its leadership and policies. But when it reopens, I want it to be with you both involved." "Both?" Mara repeated, startled. "What do I have to do with anything? I'm just a scholarship girl." Lucien shook his head. "You are the one who saw the cruelty clearly and named it out loud. You saw a system that told you to be grateful while it used you, and you refused to be quiet." He looked at the school buildings. "When Ravencrest opens again, it will need a council of student advisors, human and vampire, to keep it honest. I would like you and Elias to be among the first." Elias's eyes widened. "You mean we'd help design the rules? Together?" "Yes," Lucien said simply. "You have seen the worst of what rules can do. Perhaps you can help build something better." Mara hesitated. "I still have to take care of my brother," she said. "Classes, work, hospital visits. I don't know if I can be what you think I am." Lucien's gaze softened. "Mara Elwood," he said gently, "you do not have to become anything other than what you already are, a girl who cannot stand to see others suffer. That alone makes you dangerous to people who profit from pain, and very valuable to those who wish to end it. He slipped a small, ornate card from his pocket and handed it to her. The emblem of the Northern Court gleamed in silver on the front. On the back, a simple message: "If they threaten you again, call." "I don't live in castles and courts," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Then we will bring some of the castle to you," he replied. "Not in the form of riches or fancy titles. In the form of protection, resources, a seat at the table when decisions are made." Elias smiled, a real one this time. "You'll like the castle food," he added. "They don't do feeding programs there, just actual meals." She laughed, the sound bright and disbelieving. "Careful," she said. "If you keep being nice, people will start saying vampires are not so bad." "That is the idea," Lucien said. The sky deepened from gold to purple. Students were slowly called back to dorms to pack their things, to sign temporary transfer forms, to call parents who had no idea what had really been happening behind the academy's charming brochures. Teachers were summoned to emergency meetings. Lawyers began making calls. The world had started to move in response to what happened that day. Lucien watched his son and the human girl walking together across the lawn, talking quietly about a future neither of them had imagined yesterday. He thought about the title the human news channels would probably give this story when it broke: "Vampire King Found." Son eating from the floor in school. What he did next shocked everyone. Some would focus on the drama, on the magic broken cameras, the cracked lenses, the glowing eyes, on the confrontation with the headmaster and the threat to topple an entire program. But for Lucien, the real turning point had been smaller: a boy on a cold floor, a girl with a mop and a stubborn heart, and the moment he realized that the most unbelievable thing he could do was not destroy the world that hurt them, but reshape it. He turned away from the darkening school and began to walk toward the waiting car. There was work to do, meetings to attend, councils to challenge, laws to rewrite, but for the first time in a long time, his heavy steps felt a little lighter. Behind him, on the lawn of a broken school, a vampire prince and a poor human girl began to plan a new kind of kingdom. Not one built on fear, but on the simple, powerful idea that no one human or vampire should ever have to eat off the floor to deserve respect.